Greetings, friends. For our previous reflection, we looked at the theme of impasse and possibility, what seems to be a completely stuck situation when we look at it with our ordinary consciousness, and yet the possibilities that can blossom from that when we're open to a much wider, more spacious consciousness, when we open our hearts to the possibilities that can be birthed from God, our beloved, our Creator. And we looked at the images of Mary as a virgin and Elizabeth as an elderly barren woman, but both becoming pregnant. And these speak of the possibility of what can be born out of seemingly impossible situations. Richard Rohr, when writing about this symbolism, wrote, "Barrenness and fruitfulness are the very basics of life. We experience ourselves as barren and impotent. Then God comes into our sterile existence and creates new life. We're all symbolically barren women who of ourselves cannot bring forth life into the world. But by the overshadowing of the Holy Spirit, we will bring forth the prophet. Yahweh always turns death into life, emptiness into fullness, barrenness into fertility, and in Mary's case, humanity into divinity." This season of Advent is a season of waiting in hope for this new life and hope to be born. It is a season of gestation. And there's something so important about this gestation time, this waiting and expectation. It starts with a tiny, helpless seed. There's no way that the seed can initiate anything or make any part of this process happen. There's a sense of allowing ourselves to be stripped down, naked and vulnerable, allowing the mysterious process of life to unfold. There's also the unknowing of the waiting, not knowing how long it will take, or what exactly is happening, or where this is leading. But the key is an attitude of collaboration and inner opening. And Sue Monk Kidd wrote a wonderful book called When the Heart Waits. And in this book she wrote, "The fullness of one's soul evolves slowly. We're asked to go within to gestate the newness God is trying to form. We're asked to collaborate with grace. Waiting provides the time and space necessary for grace to happen. Spirit needs a container to pour itself into. Grace needs an arena in which to incarnate. Waiting can be such a place if we allow it." This waiting also takes place within the pain and messiness of our lives as they are, with all the challenges and impossible scenarios that we face. And again, to quote Sue Monk Kidd, crisis, change, all the myriad upheavals that blister the spirit and leave us groping. They aren't voices simply of pain, but also of creativity. And if we would only listen, we might hear such times beckoning us to a season of waiting, to the place of fertile emptiness. What a line, fertile emptiness. She goes on to write, "In the staidness of waiting, we find everything we need in order to grow. Suspended upside down in the heart of the question, we touch the sacred places of real becoming." Suspended upside down in the heart of the question. That's where we're invited to remain, to wait, and then we touch the sacred spaces of real becoming. There's an incredibly powerful sense of the necessity of these times of upheaval and inner torment as emerging from the creative birth center of God. It's the same force at work in our inner beings as the force that was involved in the birthing of the universe through the Big Bang, that gives rise to the birth of stars and galaxies, all emerging from this primordial creative dark mystery that underlies and gives birth to everything. The mystic Bede Griffiths wrote, "God is not simply in the light, in the intelligible world, in the rational order, but God is in the darkness, in the womb, in the mother, in the chaos from which the order comes. So the chaos is in God. This is why the darkness is so important. We tend to reject it as evil and negative, but darkness is the womb of life." In our modern society, we've become so used to banishing the dark with our artificial lighting. And we've become so used to being able to mechanize and control things in some way. We believe that if we just try harder, or pay more, or find the right expert to guide us, or hit on the right formula, we should get the results we want. But this is all about our effort, our will, our timing. We need to learn to let go of our control because our perspective is too limiting. Our imagination's too caught up in conventional and conditioned thinking. Jesus described that the Ruach spirit is like the wind which blows where it chooses. There's no way we can make the wind blow if we want to fly a kite or sail a yacht. All we can do is wait. In the same way, there's no way we can force the life of God to unfold within us. All we can do is be open and available to the possibility of the move of the Spirit. This waiting for God's timing is a whole process of surrendering our wills, which form the rigid walls of our small selfhood. So the surrendering and opening is crucial to an inner transformation of liberation. And so it's not that the times of waiting are empty times where nothing is happening. What is taking place is the gradual revealing and easing of our encrusted willful self, so that we gradually soften and open to the spacious freedom of life beyond our limited way of being. And we're able to flow with the grace of the Spirit in this more spacious way of being. This is a shift from feeling paralyzed by and resistant to the seeming impossible to resting into the unfolding with trust, surrendering to a life-bringing process that's bigger than us, that is being done to us from the vast creative birth center of God. David Frenette wrote, "You cannot do anything to produce an experience of God in you, but you can say yes to receiving divine love, to awakening to this sacred gift. You can say yes to letting it come into your consciousness and transform the pain of your own contraction, separation, unconscious resistance, and self-isolating behavior. You can be transformed in God's own image, awakening to the sun rising in you. You can let the Son of God shine the light of His love, Let the Spirit move a little more freely through you. It's a beautiful description. You can be transformed in God's own image, awakening to the sun rising in you. You can let the Son of God shine the light of His love. Let the Spirit move a little more freely through you. And then David Frenette goes on to say that the Spirit's presence in you is a gift unfolding, like a flower that opens on its own. Drawn forth by a light you can do nothing to produce or control. 'Tis more like being and allowing than self-accomplished busyness, like a rose's petals opening to the sunlight, like surrender unfolding inside you, like self-abandonment awakening within. Your action and contemplation is a radical consent to God's eternal nature. A radical consent to God's eternal nature. What I love about this description is that it's so organic, like the gradual process of petals opening to the light, flourishing because of the life moving through it. The process of waiting also holds up a mirror for us to recognize some of our hidden shadow areas, and this is such important work in the journey of transformation. Some of us may react to the struggle with impatience, others with despair, some with outrage. There's an excellent description of this process on a website called Contemplative View. This time of waiting brings us face to face with the dark side of our personality. We may begin to perceive the dynamics of our unconscious and to recognize the damage that has been done to us in early childhood. Through the infusion of God's light and love, God lets us see our weaknesses, deficiencies, and selfishness, which are the main sources of our emotional programs for happiness. Our faith grows and is purified, and we move toward a permanent disposition of peace beyond the ups and downs of daily life. So the very frustrations that arise in the waiting are showing us areas that we are invited to face and acknowledge, and in fact are in the process of being healed by God, precisely because they are arising. That's what we're invited to collaborate with. James Finlay describes this as the unraveling of our petty preoccupations with our self-absorbed self, and that this strangely brings us home to ourselves. We come home to God as the essence of who we are. Finlay goes on to say that the very situation we find ourselves in contains the conditions of this unraveling, and therefore our homecoming. If we open to it, give ourselves to it, and say yes to this. This waiting is never without hope. The time of an unborn child waiting in the womb is never endless waiting. It always holds the promise of a birthing. Times of darkness and despair are always waiting rooms for something new. Cocoons holding the promise of metamorphosis and emergence of new wings. But this hope is again not a quick fix emotion of hope. We might not even feel it most of the time. It's more of an underlying holding of hope, where God is silently, secretly holding and nurturing us as a mother's womb enfolds the unborn child. This is even part of the work, to let go of our need for the strong emotion of hope, so that we can start to recognize the more subtle undergirding holding of hope that is unshakable, ongoing, and faithful. So I invite you to listen to these questions for reflection and then move into a time of quiet reflection and opening yourself in trust, waiting in hope. But listen to these two questions as invitations for reflection. Do we trust that newness can be born within the tiredness and scrappiness of our lives? Do we trust that newness can be born within the tiredness and scrappiness of our lives? And then the second question, the Holy One calls, do you trust me? Will you entrust yourself to me as Creator beloved who brings something out of nothing? So I invite you to sit in the stillness of these questions, in the surrender of the spacious nothingness, the fertile emptiness, waiting in hope.